American woman Jayne Smith shares how she died while giving birth and discovered that we are immortal, eternal beings, and that the core of every human being is love.
I felt my soul, which I guess is as good a name as any, I felt my soul rise up from my chest, through my head, and out through the top of my head. I felt it. I felt the movement of it, and I heard the sound of it. It went whoosh. And then I found myself in a dark space where I didn't know what was going on. I knew something was not normal, but I hadn't a clue what it was. Suddenly, I found myself standing in a gray mist, and I realized that what's going on is I have died. I have died, but I'm still alive. And I was so thankful that my heart was about to burst, because I always hoped there was life after death, but I hadn't a clue. And here I was. I knew I had died, and yet I was alive. And I started pouring out thanksgiving to God that that's the way it was set up, that we actually do continue on.
As Jayne poured out her feelings of gratitude, something extraordinary happened.
The gray mist turned into an enormous, brilliant white light. And it was not a static light like a spotlight on the stage would be. It was a dynamic light. In some way, things were going on. Power was going on in the light. I hadn't a clue what it was all about until the light came toward me and drew me in also. And there was a point at which the light and I became one, or at least that's the way it felt to me. The light consisted of a love that I cannot even describe. No matter how hard I try, there are no words to describe this kind of light, this kind of love. The love said to me without any words, "You are my beloved soul. I love you with all of my heart. I love you without condition. You are precious to me beyond belief." This is what I was getting from just being immersed with the light. I began to become very ecstatic. The force, the power of this light was such that whatever it is in me that responds just kept getting higher and higher and higher and higher. And there was a point at which I could feel myself being cradled in the light. That's where some peace, I think, maybe was part of it, because it was the most wonderful, peaceful feeling I had ever felt. I just let myself actually, I'll use the word float in this for a while, this love and light.
While immersed in the light, Jayne began receiving knowledge directly into her being.
And I began to know things that I didn't know before. It was being fed into me as if I were a receiving station. I had no thoughts of my own at all while this was going on. And what was being transmitted to me was that I was an immortal being, that I had always existed. I always would exist. I was eternal. I was indestructible. There's nothing that ever really could happen to me to wipe me off the face of the earth or any other place. And I knew that that was true. I didn't doubt anything that the light was giving me, because somewhere inside me, I knew the light was, I didn't think, oh, the light is God. I didn't think that. I just felt the light was from God. I had feelings, not thoughts. And I knew that anything the light was giving me was the absolute truth.
Then a second block of knowledge descended upon her.
And what I knew within that block of knowledge was that the world is perfect. And when I say world, I mean the totality, the allness, the everything. It's perfect. And I remember distinctly the very words that did come in, and it was that the world operates according to a perfect plan, and the plan is working itself out in its perfection. And I knew that that was true. I knew that all of this was true.
The ecstasy kept rising, pushing her toward a threshold she didn't know existed.
The ecstasy, the bliss, didn't ever level out. It just continued and continued until I reached a point where I had my very first thought of the whole thing, and that was, I don't know how much more of this I can stand before I shatter. And the minute I had that thought, the intensity of the light began to diminish. The intensity of my own ecstasy also began to diminish. Everything just moved down to where I could handle it. And suddenly I thought, I don't know what's going on. I don't know where I am. I can't remember what's happened. I don't know whether I've been in this light for 5 minutes or 5 years or 100 years.
Soon her experience shifts into an entirely new landscape, one where she meets others waiting for her.
I found myself standing in this incredibly, awesomely beautiful green meadow, and it had a light that was rather golden, prettier than our light here on Earth, but not.
Join us tomorrow for part 2 of Jayne Smith's near-death experience.
Previously, in part 1 of 2 of Jayne Smith's near-death experience, Jayne described leaving her body during childbirth and entering a radiant light that filled her with indescribable love. Immersed in that light, she received knowledge about her eternal nature and the perfection of creation, until the intensity became more than she could bear. When the brilliance faded, she found herself somewhere entirely new. Today, in part 2 of 2, Jayne's journey moves beyond the light and into a new realm.
I found myself standing in this incredibly, awesomely beautiful green meadow, and it had a light that was rather golden, prettier than our light here on Earth, but not the great white light that I had been one with. And I stood there looking at things that I had never seen before. Color-wise, I had never seen many of the colors that these growing plants were. I could see a light shining from each of the growing things, not being shown on them from an outside source, but actually coming from inside them. The life of the plant, I guess, and it came through as this lovely light. Finally, I looked up and saw at a distance of, I would guess, maybe 500 yards, I saw a low hill. And standing on that hill were maybe 18, 19, 20 people at the most. And these people were in robes, very simple robes, nothing at all elaborate, just robes. And they were in all these many colors. They seemed to be standing around in little groups, waiting for something. I now think of them as helpers. I think they were waiting for people like me, who had kind of accidentally stumbled in, maybe. The minute I had the thought of, I want to be over there, I want to talk with these people, I was there. I didn't have to walk the 500 yards or climb the little rise. I was simply standing there. And a group of 3 or 4 men moved toward me.
One man in particular approached her.
I would say, if I had to guess, he might have been about 60, 65 years old. He had a bald head. He had white hair over the sides and around the back. He had the most beautiful face I have ever seen on any human being. It encompassed all of wisdom, all of compassion, all of love and understanding. I knew the very second I looked at him that anything he told me would be truth. I had no clue who he was. Nothing inside me thought it was Jesus, God, Peter, Paul. He was nameless, but he was a spiritual authority of some sort who was going to be someone I could completely believe without a second thought. His robe was purple, and I must tell you, we didn't talk with words. I only had to have the germ of what I was going to say, and he received it immediately.
Jayne sensed that her experience was about to change.
The first thing I said to him was, I know what has happened. I understand. I know that I have died. And he said, again, without words, he transmitted to me mentally, I guess, that's correct. Yes, yes. But you will not be staying here because it isn't time for you to be here yet. And he asked me a question. He said, what is in your heart?
In that moment, Jayne was shown something profound about her true nature.
In some way that I cannot ever understand or describe, I was enabled for a few seconds to look into my soul, I guess, the deepest part of me. They say the heart is the gateway to the soul. I think that's where I went. I saw what the core of me was, and it was love. It was perfect love. It was the same thing that I had been immersed in with the light. That was the core of me. And I knew it wasn't just the core of me, it was the core of human beings. It was the way in which we are created in the image of God. That's the part. We are that piece of God ourselves. That is who we really are. And I remember thinking, of course. I used to know that. How did I ever forget that?
Jayne then asked one final question.
Well, since I can't stay, since I have to go back, can you tell me what everything is all about? Everything. The whole of creation, what is it all about? And he did tell me. And I'm sorry to tell you, I can't tell you. He told me, and it was so simple, it wasn't more than 3 or 4 sentences. I comprehended that totally. And I said, can I take all this back with me? Since I can't stay, can I take everything that I have learned back? Because there are so many people I want to tell this to. And he said, you may take everything back with you except the answer to the last question, and that you aren't going to be able to remember.
Immediately, Jayne was pulled back into her body.
At that point, everything became blackness again. I heard an incredibly loud and unpleasant, irritating sound, which sounded like somebody had grabbed an oven door and decided to just slam it as hard and as loudly as they could, and it was just bang, 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 bang. And it was soon over, and then there was silence. And then I heard in my ear an electronic click.
When Jayne regained consciousness, she realized the doctor was working intensely to save her life.
I thought, I cannot tell her what has happened to me. I can't ask her any questions. I don't dare, because she will think I have had a postpartum breakdown of some kind.
Jayne's doctor later told her husband that she had thought she'd lost Jayne for a minute, but both mother and baby were fine. For 23 years, Jayne kept her experience mostly to herself, believing she was the only person on earth to have had such an experience. Then she discovered Raymond Moody's book on near-death experiences.
I can't even describe to you what it was like to read that book. I cried my way all the way through it, copious tears. I knew for the first time that I was not the only person on earth to have had this experience. And for 23 years, I thought I was. And what was I supposed to do with it? I didn't know what I was supposed to do. And ultimately, I did know. I was supposed to get the word out, but not back then. The time was simply not right.